On Saturday, February 10th, 2018, a woman had a simple meal of beans and pico de gallo prepared by her mother Paula and walked out of her house. The images you see on screen are the last known images of her. This is a case that captivated and obsessed many people in Chile. Fernanda Maciel is a petite woman, reportedly less than 5 feet tall. What made her disappearance so shocking is she was 32 weeks or 7 months pregnant at the time. What made Fernanda's disappearance so strange is that she made no indication she wanted to leave. In fact, she has a loving boyfriend that was approved by her family. They were even planning to move into a new home they got together. But when the truth was finally discovered, it shocked and disgusted so many. And a fair warning, some of what I'm about to tell you might be hard to listen to. Hi, this is Victor from Crimes Anatomy. Each week I research and present worldwide crime cases because the truth is stranger than fiction. Returning to the day Fernanda Maciel disappeared, when she ate her beans and pico de gallo, her mother realized she seemed different, unusually quiet. Paula later recalled, "She didn't talk or joke with her younger siblings like she usually did. I served her food, but she ate in complete silence." At 5:29 p.m., Fernanda left her house on Puntiago Street, carrying only her keys and cell phone. She crossed the intersection towards La Lima Road, a route she had walked many times before, but this time she never returned. Paula waited anxiously for hours, expecting her daughter to come home. Calls to Fernanda's cell phone went straight to voicemail, as if the device had been turned off. The situation was especially alarming. Fernanda was 32 weeks pregnant. The next day, February 11th, Paula and Fernanda's partner, Luis Peterson, the father of her unborn child, reported her missing to the authorities. The Carabineros, Chile's primary police force, initiated the investigation. However, without immediate signs of foul play, the specialized Policía de Investigaciones de Chile, or PDI, was not yet involved. Carabineros officers distributed missing persons posters, shared information on social media, and questioned locals. Their only clue seemed to be surveillance footage which showed Fernanda crossing Puntiago Street at 5:29 p.m. But what's strange is no other cameras nearby found her. A neighbor, Ortiga Miño, claimed to have seen her heading towards the Andes Mountains. Despite these efforts, there were no further leads, no sightings, no social media activity, and no financial transactions. Days turned into weeks and then months. With Fernanda's due date approaching, her disappearance grew even more perplexing. Many feared the worst, but her family refused to give up, determined to uncover the truth and find their daughter. To understand Fernanda's disappearance, it's also crucial to examine her life story. Fernanda de Marias Maciel Correa was born on May 9, 1996, in Independencia, Santiago, Chile. After her parents separated in 1999, she and her siblings were raised by their mother, Paula, who relocated the family to Conchalí. Initially, Fernanda adapted well to change. She performed well in school, maintained a cheerful personality, and stayed connected with her father. However, as she entered adolescence, Fernanda's behavior began to deteriorate. Her grades dropped, and she developed a short temper, frequently clashing with classmates, siblings, and even her mother. Her concerned mother sought help from school counselors. In 2007, she was sent to an institution for at-risk minors, but the intervention proved ineffective because she stayed out late, occasionally failing to return home at all. Police often found her in the company of teenagers associated with drug use, and being an impressionable teenager, she adopted their habits, falling deeper and deeper into substance abuse. Although Fernanda still lived with her mother and siblings, she became emotionally distant. She spent most of her days sleeping and only left home to meet friends and feed her addiction. Her academic performance continued to decline, forcing her to repeat a grade. Then, tragedy struck on July 2, 2012, when Fernanda's dad died suddenly from a stroke. Devastated, Fernanda honored him with a tattoo of his name, but his death fueled her downward spiral and self-destructive behavior further. Attempts by family members to intervene resulted in explosive confrontations. She would consume a lot of alcohol and spend her nights outside, often not returning home. She barely graduated high school, but she did manage to secure work as a nightclub hostess. The environment only reinforced her unhealthy habits. She cycled through unstable relationships. Her downward spiral continued until one day when she met Luis Peterson, a 36-year-old taxi driver, and he seemed to genuinely care about her. In fact, he even earned her mother's trust and was welcomed into their home. Fernanda showed signs of improvement. She curbed most of her drug use, and her relationship with Luis, although not without the occasional drama, seemed stable at least. But as many couples, there was jealousy involved. She once scratched Luis's taxi in a jealous outburst, but such incidents were infrequent. Fernanda eventually left the nightclub job and became a waitress at a local restaurant. The position offered a healthier work environment. However, when her employer discovered that she was pregnant, she was fired. But this time, instead of spiraling downwards, Fernanda took legal action and was successfully reinstated at her position after a complaint at the labor inspectorate. At the time of her disappearance, Fernanda had come a long way from her troubled past and was now determined to build a better future and welcome the birth of her baby daughter. Almost a month went by with nothing to show, and on March 5th, 2018, Fernanda's family had grown so frustrated they launched an official complaint against the Carabineros. This prompted the more specialized PDI to take over the investigation. PDI are known for their expertise in criminal cases, and they wasted no time to explore multiple theories that could help explain Fernanda's disappearance. The runaway theory. They explored whether Fernanda had simply run away, possibly after a heated argument with Luis, or to reconnect with another lover. This theory actually gained some traction in the media because a couple vacationing in San Carlos de Bariloche, Argentina, had claimed to have seen a woman resembling Fernanda who appeared to have undergone cosmetic surgery. Paula, now desperate for answers, traveled to Argentina, but after much exploration, she firmly dismissed this runaway theory, emphasizing that Fernanda wouldn't simply run away and leave all her belongings at home. Besides, she was looking forward to moving into the home Luis was building for their growing family. The next theory explored was the drug theory. Investigators considered whether Fernanda's past had any connection to her disappearance. Although she had left that life behind, rumors began to surface that she had been seen with a known drug dealer, Alexander Ayurtsin, and his partner, Maria Araya. The day before her disappearance, witnesses claimed Fernanda had been holding a package during the encounter. However, both Ayurtsin and Araya provided alibis and were ruled out. Attention then shifted to Joel Cuevas Flores, a local drug trafficker and Fernanda's former romantic partner. Despite allegations that Cuevas' girlfriend, Francesca Orellana, had threatened Fernanda a year prior, both were cleared during questioning for unrelated arrest. The next theory was the accident theory, where some speculated that Fernanda may have died in an accident, possibly when traveling on that road. Yet, there was no evidence of an accident, and nothing else was seen on any of the other cameras. This left investigators to rule out this theory pretty quickly. Another theory suggested that Fernanda was depressed and had took her own life, but friends and family were quick to dismiss this theory, reminding everyone that she was excited for the baby and was getting her life sorted out. Another theory is that she could have been kidnapped, but there were no ransom demands and there was no physical evidence to support this scenario either. Lastly, due to her past ties to the drug world, at least as a consumer, detectives wondered the possibility of a drug-related killing, especially to settle bad debts. But as with all other theories, no concrete evidence ever emerged. Looking into suspects, the PDI scrutinized everyone in Fernanda's life. Several suspects emerged, each presenting possible motives and opportunities. Suspect 1, her current boyfriend, Luis Peterson. Their relationship, Though seemingly stable had its share of conflicts, friends revealed that Fernanda had voiced concerns about Luis's temper, describing him as occasionally controlling and verbally abusive. Luis acknowledged that they had their arguments, but denied there was any physical abuse. "We had our issues, like any couple," he said, "but we were excited about our daughter's birth." After a thorough investigation by the authorities and checking out his alibi, which placed him at a completely different location than Fernanda, and despite some doubts about how genuine their relationship was, no evidence seemed to link him to any crime, and he was eventually ruled out. The next suspect is a taxi driver. This taxi driver and Fernanda were seen frequently. Friends claimed he had been overly persistent, asking for a number and offering baby clothes, but the driver denied harassing her, saying she had willingly exchanged contact information with him after he drove her to a hospital for a medical issue. However, some text messages recovered from Fernanda's phone contradicted the story, showing she had accused him of being too pushy. Now, despite initial suspicions, the driver did provide an alibi as well, and forensic tests on his vehicle yielded no evidence of foul play. The next set of suspects were Fernanda's co-workers at the restaurant where she worked, because while some acknowledged her recent efforts to turn her life around, others described frequent clashes over tips and punctuality. A supervisor admitted, "None of us really liked her." However, none of the co-workers seemed to have any known motive or opportunity to be gained by her disappearing, and they were all eventually cleared. But there was one more suspect in Fernanda's life, her longtime friend, Felipe Andreas Rojas Lobos. He was a neighbor and friend, and they had known each other for over a decade. Word had gotten out that day that Fernanda had planned to meet him at the winery and warehouse where he worked on the day she disappeared. And indeed, the security footage showed Fernanda walking towards the warehouse at 5:29 p.m. There was no footage of her actually entering the warehouse. When questioned, Felipe confirmed that he planned to see Fernanda that day, but she never showed up. He even sent her a WhatsApp message at 8:05 p.m. saying, "You never came, dude. I waited for you secretly." But investigators were skeptical of his account, and they decided to take a closer look. Indeed, 2 days later, surveillance footage showed him carrying a 25-kilogram bag of cement into the warehouse, a purchase that was made recently, and a purchase that was unrelated to his job duties. The red flags kept piling up. On February 13th, Felipe was caught on camera inspecting the security cameras along La Lima Street, seemingly checking whether they captured the warehouse entrance. He had enlisted the help of a friend, Christian Lobos Trujillo, to help. Christian would later come forward to the police that Felipe specifically asked him if the cameras were pointing at the warehouse. The next day, February 14th, Felipe abruptly resigned from his job at the warehouse. And this was strange because when he wanted the job, he had assured his employers that he would stay in this position for at least 1 year. During the initial stages of investigation, the Carabineros had also searched the warehouse, as well as looked into Felipe's home, but they found no evidence of foul play. The PDI remained skeptical of him, even as the case went cold, and there seemed to be no updates for a long time. Then, one day, 16 months later, in June 2019, everything changed when a woman came forward with an explosive testimony. Wishing to remain anonymous, we'll call her Nancy. Nancy revealed that Felipe had confessed to her about killing Fernanda. According to Nancy, Felipe actually said he met Fernanda at the warehouse on February 10th. They smoked a joint together and talked, but the conversation turned dark when Felipe brought up his ex-girlfriend extorting him. Fernanda allegedly became confrontational, and in the heat of the moment, Felipe pushed her. She fell, hitting her head on a piece of furniture, and began convulsing. Felipe started to panic. He didn't know what to do. He tried to offer help, but she was unresponsive. He said in his panicked state, he dug a grave and buried her in the backyard of the warehouse. When Nancy confronted him initially, he said he just made this up out of stress. and initially she believed him. But over the months they were together, his behavior seemed to change. He was always looking over his shoulder, she said. He kept begging me not to tell anyone what he told me. That's when I realized he wasn't really lying. He might have actually done it. Acting on Nancy's tip, the investigators returned to the warehouse on June 24, 2019. What they uncovered confirmed their worst fears. But it was so much worse than what Nancy had initially told them, as we'll get into in a moment. On June 24, 2019, nearly 16 months after Fernanda's disappearance, investigators arrived at the warehouse on the Lima Street. They began excavating the backyard, a space littered with rubble and partially overgrown with bushes. The forensic team, alongside police officers, carefully cleared the area. Initially using hand tools, they dug approximately 35 centimeters into the soil before they encountered a solid surface, a concrete slab, roughly 115 by 50 centimeters, and with a thickness of 5 centimeters. When they managed to get the slab out of the way, they noticed a whitish powder. This powder was later identified as lime. They kept digging deeper and deeper, and that's when they found a white shoe, which was attached to a human foot, the first unmistakable sign that they had found a body. Further excavation revealed a white tarp tightly wrapped around the remains. The body was positioned in a forced fetal posture with the hands bound by cloth. It was well preserved and almost unmistakably Fernanda's, and her dress was pulled up to her waist, exposing her private parts, and her underwear was torn and displaced. These details indicated that she had likely been in a violent assault before her death. Remarkably, the body was mummified. It seemed to be preserved by that whitish powder or lime and cement that was covering it. Paula was immediately called to the scene. When she arrived, she was heartbroken because she recognized Fernanda's earrings and clothes. Through fingerprints and tattoos, investigators confirmed what Fernanda's family had feared. The body did indeed belong to Fernanda Maciel, Korea. The on-site forensic team, led by Dr. Vivian Bustos Bacurezo, conducted a preliminary examination. The mummified state of the body, devoid of insect colonization, suggested it had been buried soon after death, minimizing exposure to external elements. During the autopsy, the team discovered a fracture in Fernanda's hyoid bone, a U-shaped bone in the neck above the larynx. This type of fracture is often associated with strangulation. Hemorrhagic infiltrates or areas of bleeding were found in the neck muscles, including the sternothyroid and sternohyoid. These findings, along with compression injuries in the larynx and trachea, confirmed manual or ligature strangulation. Around Fernanda's neck, they found a tightly knotted piece of canvas which had been used as the ligature. The force of the compression had fractured her hyoid bone and caused the other injuries observed. The strangulation likely triggered labor, causing her water to break. Deprived of oxygen, the fetus suffocated on the amniotic fluids that filled her lungs. Experts concluded that the fetus was expelled post-mortem due to the pressure of the cement slab and soil compressing Fernanda's body. Near her remains, investigators discovered crucial evidence: a set of rusty keys with a heart-shaped keychain identified as hers, a black bra and pink underwear, both torn, bearing signs of a violent struggle, a cement wrapper from the brand San Juan, matching the cement Felipe purchased on February 12, 2018. These items painted a grim picture of premeditation and an attempt to conceal a heinous crime. CCTV footage played a crucial role in reconstructing the events around Fernanda's disappearance. On February 10, 2018, Felipe was recorded arriving at the warehouse on his bicycle. 12 minutes later, Fernanda was seen leaving her home and heading towards the warehouse, crossing Puntiago Street before disappearing from view due to dense vegetation. At 5:33 p.m., two dogs seemed to be exiting the warehouse. likely led out by Felipe, likely after Fernanda was led inside. Between 5:33 p.m. and 7:34 p.m., the crime seems to have occurred. At 7:34 p.m., Felipe was captured leaving the warehouse on his bicycle, but instead of returning directly home, located right next to Fernanda's own house, he took a circular route, a behavior investigators later attributed to a guilty conscience. On February 12th, Felipe was recorded purchasing a 25-kilogram bag of San Juan cement at a hardware store in Conchalí. The light blue bag found at the scene had the brand's logo on it, but he returned again to the store, this time buying mortar. Both times he transported the materials by his bicycle. As you know, the next day on February 13th, he was caught on camera examining cameras along the street, and then on February 14th, he abruptly resigned from his position. These actions seem to point to a desperate attempt to evade detection. The trial of Felipe Andreas Rojas Lobos began on March 6, 2013, and featured over 58 witnesses and 41 experts. The prosecution emphasized the brutality of the crime, highlighting Fernanda's vulnerability as a pregnant woman who had trusted Felipe, a man she had known for over a decade. Despite attempts by Felipe's lawyer to request a retrial, the evidence against him was overwhelming. The prosecution built a compelling case against him. They argued for the harshest possible sentencing, citing his calculated actions and lack of remorse, and the sheer brutality of the crime, which we'll get into in a moment. The first thing was the delayed and inconsistent statements. Felipe Rojas did not provide a coherent version of events until December 20th, 2020, more than 34 months after Fernanda's disappearance. By then, there was enough crucial evidence that had already been gathered against him, including the location of the body, the cause of death, and his exclusive access to the warehouse, that his delayed statement added little value to information the investigators had already uncovered. So Felipe was the only person who had access to the warehouse on February 10th, as was confirmed by witness Cesar Gonzalez, the warehouse owner, and Christian Rivera, the manager. Both men were on vacation, and Felipe had the set of keys to do some odd jobs as well as take care of the dogs. Fernanda had also told a close friend, Nicholas, that she was going to the warehouse to meet her friend, Felipe, which also placed him at the scene of the crime, as well as her having a motive to go there. Then, the state of Fernanda's body told a horrifying story. Her dress was rolled up, exposing her private parts, and because her underwear was torn, with these signs of sexual violence, the evidence supported that something far worse had gone on than what Felipe had even told Nancy. Then, Felipe had also lied consistently to investigators. He had told Fernanda's mother that Fernanda never arrived at the warehouse, despite knowing she was already dead. He had sent several WhatsApp messages to Fernanda on the day and after, pretending he didn't know what really happened to her. He had also asked a company employee to lie about the time he returned the warehouse keys. He falsely claimed to friends and family that he was concerned about Fernanda's disappearance. He'd also lied about why he purchased lime. He said his boss had asked him to do so to paint the grotto, but this was never the case. He'd also told his now ex-girlfriend Nancy that Fernanda had hit her head and died accidentally, but he later changed the story. There was also evidence that he tried to manipulate witnesses, such as asking Nancy to lie to the police about Fernanda's body, as determined by several audio recordings. And then was the behavior after the crime. On February 12th, he had actually called his boss, Christian Rivera, asking for permission to go out and look for Fernanda. However, security footage showed he had never left the warehouse. Instead, he entered twice with bags, likely containing cement and mortar, and left at around 4:18 p.m. This contradicted his claim of searching for Fernanda and instead supported the prosecution's theory that he was preparing to bury her body. Throughout the investigation, Felipe displayed a complete lack of empathy or remorse. Witnesses described him as cold and manipulative, even joking about Fernanda's death. He said she is now cooking somewhere. The prosecution argued that Felipe is a narcissistic psychopath and he views his own actions with a sense of detachment. Based on months of investigation, the prosecution presented a horrifying picture of Fernanda's final hours. On February 10, 2018, she left her home and was lured to a warehouse at 1635 La Lima Street in Conchali by her neighbor and longtime friend, Felipe Rojas Lobos. The two had known each other for over a decade, and Fernanda trusted Felipe enough to meet him alone, carrying only her keys and phone. She had no reason to suspect the horrifying fate that awaited her. Felipe had meticulously planned the crime. Days before the meeting, he had dug a grave in the warehouse courtyard, a pit specifically sized to fit Fernanda's body. The premeditation suggested that Felipe had intended to kill Fernanda and conceal her body long before the actual crime took place. At approximately 5:30 p.m., Fernanda arrived at the warehouse. At 5:33 p.m., Felipe had let the dogs out of the warehouse, ensuring they wouldn't interfere with what he was about to do. Inside, Felipe betrayed her trust in the most heinous ways. He attacked her from behind, overpowering her with his size and strength. Felipe is over 6 feet tall and Fernanda less than 5 feet. As a petite pregnant woman, there could be little she could do from behind. He penetrated her. Fernanda tried to fight back, but Felipe tied her up. Felipe brought Fernanda to the point of unconsciousness, leaving her near death. The autopsy concluded that Fernanda died from asphyxiation due to strangulation, but later forensic analysis by Dr. Carmen Cerda suggested may have been alive when she was buried, because to her, the evidence pointed to asphyxiation by suffocation, which was likely caused by being wrapped so tight in cloth in a forced fetal position that she couldn't breathe. The force, pressure, and violence inflicted upon Fernanda during the attack had led Felipe to believe that she was dead when she was still alive, and then he wrapped her tightly in cloth and buried her in a shallow grave, where she ultimately suffocated due to lack of oxygen and the forced fetal position she was in, where she couldn't breathe. The unborn daughter had no chance and died, drowning in amniotic fluids. After the murder, all the steps Felipe took to cover his tracks were corroborated. The cement bag he purchased and the floor mortar from the hardware store, as well as the receipts of these purchases, were surprisingly all found at the crime scene. Author's note: I find it extremely unbelievable that someone would leave receipts for things he purchased to cover up a murder simply lying at the scene of the cover-up. Fernanda's unborn daughter had a name given to her before this whole horrific ordeal. She was going to be welcomed into this world as a baby girl, Josepha. On April 25, 2023, the court imposed a maximum penalty of qualified life imprisonment on Felipe Andreas Rojas Lobos, citing the extreme brutality of the crimes, the aggravating circumstances of treachery and certainty, and the need to uphold public confidence in the legal system.